Hello, and welcome to the Maple Moon. This is Courtenay. Now, the short story is something I've been a fan of for many years, since I was a kid, in fact. When we were in primary school, we were set a task where we had to write a short story about a spider in a rainforest. And it was like a magical rainforest, and we just had to write this narrative about this spider that was in this rainforest. Um, and every creative task we were ever set, I was always so keen and so excited to do it because I love writing stories. I always wanted to be a writer even then. And when we're kids, most of us are introduced to the short story through fairy tales, the Three Little Pigs, Cinderella, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, things like that. And then as you get older, you're introduced to a lot more. The short story there's still a stigma attached to it today, which I really don't understand, because the short story can pack so much into a short number of pages, whether that be 50 pages or even three. I write short stories a lot of the time. I'm currently writing one as well. And they're a fine art to get right. And people write them off all the time, but I think a short story is actually harder to write than a novel is, because you have to be it's economy of language. So what I want to start with in this episode is to read a passage from my journal. This excerpt was written on the 23rd of August. I haven't done a lot today. I finished reading Paying Party's work by Elizabeth Winder as part of my play research. The Mademoiselle internship is such a fascinating thing. The play's title has been decided. It will be called, redacted, after the vintage lipstick and recipe. Took one ibuprofen at 3:12 a.m. And speaking of pain in that journal entry, let's dive into what might be my favourite read of the year. Daphne du Maurier was born to a wealthy family in Regent's Park, London on the 13th of May 1907. Her father was actor-manager Sir Gerald du Maurier, and her mother was actress Muriel Beaumont. Okay, now picture the scene, right? 8-year-old Courtenay sitting at home during the snowy winter of 2005. Dad is at work, and Mum and I are in the lounge with hot cups of tea. She says she's going to introduce me to a film her and my grandparents watched decades prior. The film in question was the 1940 adaptation of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, the Hitchcock one. It was so atmospheric. I remember it so well. It was a really dark day as well. So, in our old lounge in my childhood home, it was sort of at the back of the house. So, it didn't get much light. So, it was often very dark in there, which I loved. I've always loved having the curtains closed and having dark rooms. And we shut the curtains, and it was dark, and it was snowy, and it was cold. And we had like cups of tea and blankets, and we watched Rebecca. It was probably the holidays, half term. Now, Daphne du Maurier has a new collection out with Virago Press, which is After Midnight, it's called. And there are 13 tales contained within the collection. It's introduced by Stephen King. The 13 tales, the actual titles are The Blue Lenses, Don't Look Now, The Alibi, The Apple Tree, The Birds, Monte Burrito, The Pool, The Doll, Ganymede, Leading Lady, Not After Midnight, Split Second, and The Breakthrough. So the first story, The Blue Lenses, is possibly one of my favourites. So the synopsis is Marda West is recovering from an eye operation in a nursing home in London. Eyes covered by bandages and a crepe binder, Marda is reassured that she will see again. Temporary blue lenses have been implanted to help her adjust. After a significant period of time being bandaged up, they are removed. Only able to see shapes at first, she discovers something peculiar. Featuring animals, gaslighting, and an atmospheric narrative, The Blue Lenses is a masterclass in the Gothic. It's a wonderful story. And what really makes it so good is I don't know whether you would call it necessarily an unreliable narrator. Actually, no, you would, sorry, correction, you would, because at first she's an unreliable narrator and you'll see why later on. But I think Daphne du Maurier gets very little press. Like, we all know her for Rebecca, but I don't think people understand how impressive her writing actually was and still is. I was talking about this to Gail Crowther the other day, who's wrote a lot on Sylvia Plath, and she was saying that she feels the same way and that she's trying to get more people into Daphne du Maurier. And I think these short stories they're just all so expansive. They're extremely deft, she's a deft, she is a master with a pen. And it's the atmosphere it creates. Not only the writing is beautiful and the word choices, but it's the atmosphere that she creates. You really, in such a short space of time, you really find yourself wrapped up in this place. And with The Blue Lenses being the first story, I think that is probably, it really sets the tone for the rest of the collection. And the second story is Don't Look Now, and the interesting about that one is that there is a famous adaptation of 1973 which starred Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland, and it's set in Venice, the story. And there's another actual story that's set in Venice, but the synopsis for Don't Look Now is John and Laura have come to Venice to try and escape the pain of their young daughter's death, but when they encounter two old women who claim to have second sight, they find that instead of laying their ghosts to rest, they become caught up in a train of increasingly strange and violent events. Now, I recently saw the adaptation for the first time, and it's totally atmospheric, but I always think you should read the story first. And speaking of adaptations, The Birds is included in this collection, which if you've seen the famous Hitchcock film, you'll know what it's about. But actually, I discovered that I very much prefer the short story. There's so much more to the short story, and what I don't like about the adaptation is that it's set in America. The actual story is set in England, and I think it works so much better for the atmosphere. If you watch the film, the way everything's sort of Americanized, I feel like you don't get that sort of fear that you would get here on a dingy British day. But the whole, all of the stories, in fact, are they're all so different. They're all their own beasts in a way. Um, but I think that is a sort of her talent, really. I mean, if I open up these stories, I mean, this is just from one of the stories. I think it might be, is it Montevideo? It might be the pool. Could be the pool. Yeah, it's probably the pool. Um, she says, curiously, it was like the first flavor of intoxication, but more heightened, more acute, and deeply secret. It is important to remember that, deeply secret, this sensation was somehow palpable, invading the whole of me, the palms of my hands, my scalp, my throat was dry. Physically, I felt I was infused with electricity, that I'd become some sort of powerhouse radiating into the damp atmosphere of this Venice I'd never seen. Currents which, becoming charged with other currents, returned to me again. I mean, can you, like, that writing is like butter. It's like treacle on the page. She was a phenomenal writer, and this collection is certainly standout. I mean, I've shouted it from the rooftops. It is out on the, I believe, the 31st of September with um with Virago Press. It's either 31st or the 1st of October, but I know that it's at the end of this month. Yeah, with Virago Press. I only have a digital copy. I've been dying to get my hands on a physical copy. I did get in touch with Virago the other week. I emailed them about possibly getting a physical copy, but we shall see about that because I love this collection. I love Daphne du Maurier. I think she was a phenomenal writer. It's the perfect book for the cold seasons because actually it's been warm this last couple of days because of the storm, but it really slowed down last night. I've been freezing all night. And actually, if you were going to pair this book with a drink and a snack, I would pair it with a dark twinkle cocktail. So a twinkle is champagne, vodka, and elderflower liqueur, but then to make it dark, you could add a dark drink or maybe food colouring. And the snack would be a bag of bonfire toffee. Bonfire toffee reminds me of my childhood. If you know the taste, you know precisely what I'm talking about. The taste of just bonfire treacle is just unmatched. I remember when we were in primary school and we made the treacle with Mrs. McGowan, and because normally it hardens up to this sort of rock kind of form, but when we made it, it came out of the pan just this soft, buttery um treacle, and on tasting it, it was like heaven, being transported to heaven. So Daphne du Maurier After Midnight is out at the end of this month with Virago Press. Now, what makes a short story good? This is a question that plagues many people, and as I've been writing short stories myself, it takes a lot of planning to make them good. You have to plan them so carefully because you've only got so many pages. It's not as if you've got a full novel to establish character, establish tone. You only have so little time. And I think that is what makes them much more difficult. You've got to, I suppose, think about it this way. If you are meeting someone for the first time and you only have 5, 10 minutes to chat, and you've got to find out their entire life story in that 5 to 10 minutes, that's what writing a short story is like. And the current one that I'm writing actually is historical. It's based on true events, so that's sort of some of the work done or at least eased up for me. But even this one, I've been toying with writing this in different forms for the last 2 months, I think. And it's slowed down obviously because of my eye at the minute. But it's very slow going. But with short stories, it depends. You've got to decide the length that you want and how you want it to go. So this one is very character based. It's also event based. There is an event, you know. Um, Actually, I really should go back and use the mice quotient that I've loved before. If you've never heard of the mice quotient, certainly look it up because you've got like milieu, inquiry, character, and event. Now, milieu, I think, is milieu the place? I believe milieu is the place. Yeah, so it wouldn't be an event story, it would be entering a place and leaving a place. So mine would be a milieu story in this instance. So they enter this thing, which I'm not going to spoil because I'm still writing it, and I don't want people to steal my idea. So they enter this place for this thing, and then everything happens there, and then the story ends when they exit the place. But there's a lot of mini mice quotients within that. Um, it's really fascinating if you look it up. It's essentially based on computing nesting code, where if you have to open one thing, you must close another. It's a very, very clever way of writing a story. And what's interesting about that is that for years I've not been a planner at all. I've always hated planning. I've always wanted to be a pantser, where I just discovery write and I don't plan. I hated it until last year when I completely planned one short story. And after that, I feel like I can't discovery write anymore. I feel like I've lost my ability to just sort of write by the seat of my pants. Although I kind of have been doing that slightly with this story. But some bits I want planned, but a lot of it I'm constantly thinking about. But writing the short story it's almost like a thrill in a way. It's kind of like riding a roller coaster. Um, and there are so many stories that I love, short stories. You know, there's Charles Dickens, The Signalman. If you've never read The Signalman by Dickens, certainly read that. Um, what are the stories that I really like? God, there's so many, like Edgar Allan Poe has so many, but The Signalman off the top of my head. Um, but there are so many by authors you wouldn't think have short stories. One I read recently, actually, that you really should read is The Machine Stops. I think it's called The Machine Stops by Ian Forster. If you ever wanted a prophetic story, that is the one. It essentially predicts the internet. And this was, I think it was published in 1901. It's actually mind-blowing how accurate it is. There's readings of it on YouTube as well. I was reading that just recently and I was blown away by how prophetic it was. It really does just predict the internet. So these stories can really change the game. And I think people forget how integral short stories are to literature itself. I mean, when you mention The Birds, Daphne du Maurier's one, to people, they think of the film The Birds is integral in our pop culture because of the Hitchcock film, but people don't realize it's based on a short story, you know. These are things that, you know, we know. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. People know these things. These are short stories. They've cemented themselves so, you know, poignantly within the culture. And that is precisely why I'm always an advocate for the short story. And with Virago Press, they also have, if you're interested in Daphne du Maurier, they have lots of other new editions that I've seen online. They've redesigned everything, so they've got many different editions of the books, um, which I still need to get through because I need to get through Do You Make It In. My cousin Rachel, they've got quite a few, but these tales are really one of my favorites, and I believe this is actually my favorite read of the year. I mean, I know we're in September and we've got a couple of months left, but being that my reading has been quite slow this year, and I doubt I'm going to get through many more in the next couple of months just because of life stuff, I believe this is probably my favourite of the year, and I'm desperate to get my hands on a physical copy. So if anyone from Virago listens to this, please send me a copy because I really, really love this book, this collection. I mean, just every story. There are some sort of story collections where, you know, you might not prefer one, you might not prefer another, but every single one is it's just brilliant, and you have such a good time with them. But with everything else in the collection, so as I said, there are 13 stories, and my favourites are The Blue Lenses, Don't Look Now. Now, The Apple Tree, I've actually read in a different collection of stories. I believe it was sort of Gothic tales that I read that one in, but these are all Daphne du Maurier. This isn't an anthology. Well, it's a single authored anthology, but it's a collection more than anything. Um, so what I thought I would do as we're approaching the end of this episode is read a poem that sort of fits the tone for this episode. Now, this poem is by me. It won, well, it won third place in the London Writers' Salon monthly competition, and it placed in the Dark Poets Prize. It is called Where Flowers Give Birth to Snow by me, Courtenay Schembri Grey. To the calling smudge I wake, a pearl between lumps of cotton. I bunch myself as a spider would. Brooding, I eat my bowl of bad news. Time moves like phases of the moon, peeling the walls from coarse plinths. Above me the kites want for their shriek of meat, split from the bone, like poets bartering from the blood of an index. But I am a landscape that knows no such frenzy. The kites play Scrabble with my organs, saving the heart for the one final blow. I am dragged back into catatonia, eyes bouncing, marbles of worlds. Am I now an offer, a numbered lottery ball, Do I roll with the dreamers, with the ship of riches? On my back I lack contrition, the unforgiving light goring the shadow. They have me now, at the root, full of holes. I am to protect the winter of their lives, where flowers give birth to snow. So I hope you enjoyed that poem. Now, end of the show, I would like to ask everyone what they would like to see for the next coming shows. Obviously I am new to this. I've got a couple of ideas. I was thinking of doing about food because I think I said this last episode where food is very interesting in literature. And if you're interested in that, possibly leave comments of your favorite instances where food or elements of food are mentioned in books like Proust's Madeleines, like Story of the Eye by Bataille, has, eggs. If you know, you know. So make sure you comment about any of those. And I really, really sort of want to expand and obviously improve these episodes. As you can tell, these are conversational podcasts where it's less produced. I think in this climate we have so many overly produced things that everything has to be perfect. And I think there is beauty in imperfection. So these podcasts are somewhat rambly. I might pause, I might not say anything for a minute, but that is what I want for this podcast, where it can be intelligent, but it also doesn't have to be so overly perfect and overly produced. Because, as I said, there's beauty in imperfection. And I think we've lost the art of conversation that isn't, pre-written. It's not coming from a script where people are rehearsing. I'm a very big believer in authenticity. And there is so much, falseness and just people being fake these days, like the personas. I can't stand persona. I just believe in being real and being who you are. And like the act of a persona just really turns me off. And I've always felt that way. If I can feel someone's projecting this image of themselves, I just want to rip it from them. I want to know what's underneath, whether that's good or bad. Like, even if you're a terrible person, I would rather know that and speak to that side of you rather than this projected image. I just prefer authenticity. And if you follow me on social media, you'll know I've said that before. We're living in such a image-based climate. Everyone's obsessed with being thin, with being, youthful, and people are in Botox and fillers, and everyone's obsessed with image. And that's kind of why I made the decision probably a year ago, no, a bit longer than that, to stop posting photos of myself online because I wanted to force people to recognize what's actually inside and the words that I say. And this podcast is hopefully doing that, where you don't really know what I look like unless you look me up. You just get to listen to my thoughts and my fears and my troubles and recognize me on a human level rather than whether, my hair looks how you like it or whether I have facial symmetry. or other bullshit like that. And so, yeah, this is what the podcast is going to be, is authentic. So, as we finish up, I hope you're well. I hope if you're not well, this will bring some comfort to you. Please comment and suggestions down below, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.